This time on Engine Masters, we're gonna show you how to pick the right size carburetor on a very typical street engine. This is Engine Masters presented by AMSOIL, and this time, the audience forced me into it. Yep, this is finally the test that shows what size carburetor is gonna be best for a street engine. Now, testing carburetors on the dyno can't really reveal the drivability and streetability of any given carburetor. Really on the dyno, all we're testing is wide open throttle. And so this isn't as sort of thorough as I would like it to be. However, me and the Steves have quite a bit of experience tuning carburetors on the street. So all throughout this test, you'll be able to hear us talking about drivability issues, even though we won't be able to prove them on the dyno. But we are gonna give you the exact test that a lot of people have asked for, which is different CFM flow ratings of carburetors on the very same engine. Every carburetor that we're gonna use is from the triple whammy awesome Holley XP series. The only difference in these carburetors is the flow rating, and that's determined by the size of the venturis and the size of the throttle valves in each one. We've got 650, 750, 850, and 950 CFM carburetors, and we will run them all on this engine right here. Our ultimate average small block Chevy. It is a 383 stroker. It makes about 470 horsepower and 470 pound-feet. Even if you don't have a Chevy, this information will apply to you, because if you're making roughly the same horsepower, your engine's gonna be moving roughly the same amount of air. It doesn't matter what brand the engine is, the carburetor info is gonna be the same. The engine itself is one we've used a whole bunch of times. It's from Blueprint Engines. It's their stock 383 short block. It's their 210cc heads. We've topped it off with an Edelbrock Performer RPM air gap dual plane. It has a Comp Cam's hydraulic roller camshaft. 230 and 236 at 50 is the duration on this thing. So really super, super typical. That's our average engine. We are gonna run it starting with the smallest 650 carburetor and working towards the biggest. We're gonna roll this thing in the dyno right now and start making power. Okay, dudes, let me predict your mood.
Okay.
You're bored to death because you've seen this a zillion times and you just want to run the largest carburetor on absolutely everything.
How did you know?
How about you? Bored or is this good?
I'm really enjoying this. I got to run it before you guys were in.
Yeah.
And it's fun to go back and look at, you know, to refresh all that old stuff that you once know you don't use every day. But there's some cool stuff to be learned here.
Can I make a prediction? The bigger carburetor will have more airflow, thus it'll record a higher CFM.
He thinks he knows.
Yeah, that's what we're here to find out. I think that you don't actually believe that if you actually think through what's gonna go on here.
The other thing I want to look at is the amount of manifold vacuum at wide open throttle at the top end of the pole and compare pressure drop across the carburetor basically is what you're looking at there.
Well, we've got that too. Do we have intake manifold pressure vacuum?
Manifold pressure, CFM, we've got everything hooked up that we can to look at carburetor sizes.
So what we're looking for here is differences in jetting, differences in peak power, and some sort of estimation on drivability, and does the CFM actually go up when you keep putting larger carburetors on?
That's why I said this test is fun. I saw some stuff that's pretty good.
He's just throwing out that mystery.
Okay then, we're gonna start with the 650 CFM carb, which I'm confident is gonna kill power on this thing, but we won't know until we go bigger, so
yeah.
Fire it up. Okay.
What I'm really curious about the most, really, is the manifold vacuum.
Yeah?
Yeah, because that's going to tell me right off the bat if that carburetor is got room for improvement based on size.
Right.
Here's your manifold vacuum, Steve-O.
There you go. So it's pulling at peak 1.8 inches of mercury.
Yeah, I think there's room for improvement there.
Usually when you're looking at a carburetor sizing like this, the more manifold vacuum that you've got at wide open throttle, the more the carburetor tends to be undersized, right?
Yes.
Representing the restriction.
Exactly.
If there was no carburetor at all, it would be zero pressure drop across the plenum.
Right. So our first data point is going to be manifold vacuum at peak with the 650 CFM carburetor was 1.8 inches of mercury. And then CFM through that special carburetor hat fixture on the dyno claims 600 at peak.
Well, and it's indicating that there is some restriction there. So this is going to be kind of fun to see where it goes.
And then the next thing that we wanted to know is power.
There we go.
It's a nice curve.
That is pretty good for this little thing. I think that's the best torque it's made.
You know what I like is how flat this is in here. You know, sometimes we'll see that drop. This thing really maintains the torque down low here. I mean, that's all over 400 pound-feet.
Yeah, and that's pulling it all the way down to 2,500 RPM.
Yeah.
That torque's often just horrible down 2,500.
That would make this thing a great driver.
Yeah, it's the ultimate average 383. That's
Yeah.
what I always call that
Yeah.
motor.
It's actually a really good 383.
Yeah, it is. So let's recap the data that we just saw with that 650 CFM carb. Intake manifold vacuum at wide open, 1.8 inches of mercury. 600 CFM at peak, airflow through the carb hat. It made 479 pound-feet of torque and 470 horsepower. So I'm happy.
Me too. Yeah, this is a great
750?
baseline, great engine.
I'll be happier when we get the bigger carburetor on.
Okay, great. Well, Steve and I'll sit in here and like have a beer while you're handling that.
All right, guys.
How fast can Dulcich change this carburetor?
Aren't you guys going to come out and help?
No, we're
No,
waiting for
we're
you to change
timing
the
you.
carburetor. We're timing you.
Oh, okay.
I better go help him. He's lost.
How long is it going to take us to change carburetors here, Steve?
Less than 5 minutes if you'll hurry.
Pass there. Move this. Ah, yeah. Oh, wow.
What do you think, it was made of plastic?
No, but it's got a nice tone to it.
It's not the Liberty Bell, Steve. It's an air hat. Got it? We clear?
Yep.
Let me snug this real quick. I don't like to leave anything loose that I've started.
That's a good way to make a mistake, Steve, is if you're halfway through a job,
You don't walk away with
you
a loose.
don't.
This is the air hat we were talking about earlier. There's actually a fan blade in there. Basically, there's a sensor that's connected to that fan, and as it spins, it's actually measuring airflow. So we get to see the airflow through the carburetor or through the engine.
The thing is, carburetors, they're rated in CFM, cubic feet per minute of airflow, and that's what we measure right here. But how much CFM you're pulling through this depends on how much pressure there is pulling the air through it.
And that has to do with engine size and volumetric efficiency.
They have to have a standard for rating. So the standard is 1.5 inches of mercury.
Right.
But is that what the carburetor is going to see on a running engine? No, not
No.
necessarily.
But again, the engine's nothing more than an air pump. It's only going to pump so much no matter what size carburetor's on it.
Right, you could put the most gigantic 1250 CFM carburetor and that's not going to shove that air into the engine by itself.
So the idea here is to find the right size carburetor, the one that runs, drives, and makes good power.
And you're like a carburetor boffin. Fist bump, bro. Yeah!
Chest bump too?
No, I got to draw the line somewhere.
Our next test is going to be the 750 CFM carburetor, and this is the one that if somebody told me what engine combo this was, I'd go, yeah, just get a 750 on it.
Yeah, the 750 is probably going to be the best one.
Wait a minute.
What?
I thought you said the 950 was going to be the best one.
Well, it's just going to work so nicely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Why do I get the feeling that it's a bedtime story?
Yeah, that's right.
And it's not like the porridge is too hot, it's not too cold, it's just
It's
right.
just right. The 750, yeah, it's just right.
It's the baby bear or whatever, the porridge. I can't even remember the story.
Goldilocks and the Three Bears.
The
Everybody
Goldilocks
knows
and the
that
Three
one.
Hollies.
Yeah, it will be the Goldilocks carburetor.
So once again, Steve's got this thing all tuned up and we've got it warmed up. We got some heat in the oil, so we should be able to make a whack here and look at our data. Wow, I don't think this thing's ever made that power.
Yeah, that's pretty darn good.
Okay, manifold vacuum. And look, it dropped. At peak, we had 1.5 inches here instead of 1.8 last time.
It's not a huge drop,
No, I think we would all agree we could put a 1050 on it and we're gonna see something.
Yeah.
I've never seen one read 0.
It never
I've seen
goes
one
to
read
zero.
a half inch or so.
They won't go 0, but
yeah.
you can get under 1 inch.
Yeah.
But that's also an indicator of throttle response. You know, the more of a draw you've got on the underside, obviously not at wide open throttle, the snappier the thing tends to
Absolutely.
be.
Right.
So total CFM airflow is 606 CFM, picked up 1%. And our peak power numbers were 482.1 pound-feet and 477.5 horsepower. So significant gains, but you can see that they really don't come in till right at the top when there is some airflow demand on the thing.
Yeah, with the RPM, it's going to require more air, so that's where it's going to tax the size of the carburetor the most.
So could you determine that a 650 CFM carburetor is good too? 427 horsepower, given the range of your typical street engine, is the same amount of airflow whether it's 500 cubic inches or 150 cubic inches.
And spinning half as fast or twice as fast.
Pretty much 425 horsepower at peak, regardless of what RPM it hits it.
That's your
650 should be good
carburetor.
enough, right?
Yeah.
Is that a fair
I think
assessment?
absolutely, and I think when we start looking at that 475 to 530, 540 area,
Yep.
there we go, 750.
Yeah, that's a good way to look at it.
I mean, I wouldn't say it's a mathematical fact, but I would say it's much closer than that airflow estimate calculator that you see everywhere that has, in my opinion, no bearing on anything.
I actually tend to disagree. I think it gives you some sort of reasonable number. If we calculate this at 100% VE, it says that this engine should move 643 CFM at 100%.
So it says you want a 650 carb, but we just found out that the way Holley rates their carburetor, the
it
750 is
says you
preferable.
want 650 CFM. If we look at a 750 carb at 1.5 inches, it may be flowing more in this range. We're seeing that now.
But the big thing I think that a lot of people won't understand is I put a 750 carb on my engine, but it's not flowing 750 CFM. And that's because
The engine's not wanting to pull that much.
Right.
If it was, you would gain 150 CFM of airflow through the engine, which might
Every
be
time you bolt it on.
75 horsepower.
Exactly.
That's not, doesn't work that way.
Given engine size and speed and volumetric efficiency, it's only going to be able to pump so much air.
Okay, we're gonna go switch it up from the 750 to the 850 carb. Ready?
All right.
Oh, Dulcich was gonna do that.
I'll handle, guys.
Handle it.
You just sit there.
I trained him the first swap. So
Okay, he can do it this time?
Yeah.
You guys really aren't going to help?
Did he just come back again?
I thought,
The porridge is too hot, Dulcich. I'll handle it.
I think the 850 still has a little something for it, right at the top.
Well, you may have a chance, but this thing's making about as good a power as it's ever made.
I'm just predicting a little tickle better. Maybe not even enough to feel in a street car.
Well, then you have to ask yourself, is suffering drivability and going through all that worth 3 horsepower for the last 300 RPM?
Yes.
Of course it is.
I'm just watching, supervising.
I can agree with you that putting too much carburetor on your engine is not always the right thing to do, but you want an engine that needs the 900 or the 1000.
No such thing as too big a carburetor, just not enough engine.
Right. So you get where I'm coming from.
Oh, of course.
Yeah,
I can't argue with that logic. $850 carb is up next. Fire it up. Or we can sit here and listen to Dulcich tell us about how it's going to make another 30.
I wasn't going to suggest that.
No? What were you going to suggest?
It might make a skosh more power. That's what I'm kind of thinking, but I'm really intrigued, actually, to tell you the truth.
You've never done this test on this lame of an engine? Is that the problem?
I've done carburetor size tests on 650 horsepower motors and big engines like that, but
Yep.
not a typical street combination.
So you showed how small carbs could kill power on too big of an engine. We're going to try and show if big carbs don't work on too small of an engine.
Well, that's what you theorized, but I'm not sure your theory is going to hold.
Okay.
We're about to find out.
I think it's going to make a couple more numbers. So So the first data point that we look at here is that manifold vacuum, and wow, it dropped way more than I expected. 0.5 with the 850. That is a huge swing.
It's certainly different than the 750.
It dropped an inch.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That should be promising based on just manifold vacuum as the only criteria.
Promising in what way?
Well, you would expect the power gain.
Well, let's see if there's an airflow change before we see if there is a power change. Yes, we're looking at 615 CFM through the air hat with the 850 carb. So once again, that should make more power, but did it?
More airflows, more power in the real world.
Is that better than the 750? No, it isn't. It's down a tiny bit. 483.8 pound-feet of torque and 474 horsepower. So what does that tell you, Steve Dulcich?
Something's wrong.
No, it's doing, I think, what physics tell you that it's doing. The fuel is probably just sort of drooling out of the boosters instead of coming through atomized.
All right, so let's just take these brake numbers. We'll plot this.
So we're looking at brake-specific air consumption. On the red line, we've got the 750 carburetor, and the black one is the 850.
What that says when the number goes up is the engine, basically it's a calculation between power and air. It tells us that we didn't do as good a job using that air. So the quality of the air and fuel going into the cylinder isn't as good as it was with the 750. So the engine, higher VE number, flowed more air, but it's less efficient.
We're now at the tipping point where you have gained zero advantage with the larger carburetor, even though it flows more air, and even though it's less of an inlet restriction, it's not using the fuel and air to make the power.
The other thing is the manifold vacuum. That tells me that the 750, if it's going to make the same power a couple more, it's more efficient and it's going to drive better because it does have a better restriction. It's going to have throttle response and makes the same power. So
the last thing to look at is exactly how bad is the 950, right?
It probably won't be any worse than this, I would say.
The only way to know is to go out there, put one on and find out.
Dulcich, go ahead.
No, I'm deflated now. I'm going to let you do it.
Okay.
Go change that carburetor, Freiberger.
Now we're ready to go with the Holley 950 CFM carb. Let's find out what it does for power, although I already see where this is going. It's downhill. Right?
I don't know if we're going downhill, but we're certainly not doing any uphill right now.
I noticed also it loaded kind of okay.
I rolled in half throttle, let it pick it up instead of just slamming it and making it pull it back.
So when the dyno is initially loaded, you're trying to get the engine to wide open throttle and have the water brake on the dyno limit the RPM to like 2400 so that you can start the test and sweep through 2500 and go. When the airspeed is really slow because of a very large carburetor, sometimes it won't meter fuel there, and so you gotta like drive it a little bit to get it there.
Get it in.
But that's really the only indicator that we've got on the dyno about a drivability situation, where sometimes if you've got a tight converter and you're trying to foot brake it or something, we've seen this on the Roadkill crop duster, a huge carburetor just won't take it. Look, it dropped the intake manifold vacuum again. It's 0.4 and the CFM, 618. So really, I think what that's telling you is even if this carburetor is capable of flowing more, the engine is sort of at its limit, right?
Yeah, it's just not going to flow more no matter what size carburetor.
What did it do with the power? The 950 carb made 480.6 pound-feet of torque and 471.5 horsepower. And there you go. The 750 actually made more power, just a hair above it. Although look, the 750 is even better down here, which actually kind of makes sense. In this low RPM range, it's metering or making more atomization there or something.
I am curious about one thing here though. Let's compare this to the 850 momentarily. The engine has become much less efficient with this carburetor.
Okay.
Look how much more fuel it takes to make similar power and have the same air-fuel ratio. Even though it flowed a little more CFM, the VE went up. And you hear this all the time, oh, it's all about VE. Well, it's about quality as well. It's about what the air is doing. So if we look at brake-specific air consumption and brake-specific fuel consumption, they're both going to go up, which is the wrong direction.
Which tells you a couple things. The air's moving more slowly through the venturi, so there's slower airspeed in the manifold, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's probably dribbling out of the booster.
Yeah, it's about quality, not just quantity.
Yeah, you'd have a larger droplet size.
Yeah.
And there's some sensitivity to that in terms of combustion and also distribution. So There's a lot of like nuances
There
to
is.
engine performance besides how big your carburetor is.
And this has been way more dramatic than I expected, because usually the bigger the carburetor, the more power you make on
It
the
picks up a
dyno.
couple and
But this thing is just sort of gutless enough that it really showed you that in the ultimate average 3-3 world, that 750 carburetor is the perfect carburetor for this engine.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can make this as a sort of rule. Pick the smallest carburetor that makes the power that you want, and it will
Absolutely.
have the best drivability.
absolutely.
Oh, that's true. I'll agree
Right?
with that. Normally you're saying, oh, well, you know, you might give up that 1 or 2 horsepower at the very top and you won't feel that, but the drivability of the 750s, but
No.
actually, no. The 750 makes better power, it's more efficient, it makes better use of the fuel, and
It's more better.
it's the right carb. I guess, really, you always liked the 750, and I can see why.
It's drivability. If it were 5 down, I'd still take the smaller carb.
Okay?
We're done.
Winning.
Bam!
Bam.
Boom!
Dude, we're shaking the foundations of your core beliefs.
I feel like I'm being torn down one delusion at a time. Seriously, with all this testing and the results.
950 carburetor did not make the best power.
Bigger is just enough, usually.
I go where you go also. I have to say the 950 is usually the go-to. And I would never buy a 650 for anything personally, but any engine sort of in this range, the 750 is the way to go, and an 850 tends to be pretty good for something even making like 500 horsepower.
Yeah, I mean, back in the day, everybody had the 750 Holly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, that's my resistance. Sometimes it was the 30-30-10 back in secondary.
I see it
but
coming.
I wanted the 850. That was
Right.
the big dog, you know?
Okay, for the same reason, I wanted the 830 because nobody had one. It's like, ooh, 830, that must be like trick for some reason.
No, well, it's the guy thing, you know, you want the big number, you want the most buttons, you want the biggest Venturis, you want it all. But this proved that that's not necessarily the way to go, and I accept that. I've reached a plateau of development and maturity where I can accept a 750 carburetor is better than a 950.
Shredding Dulcich's beliefs one episode at a time. That's what we do here on Engine Masters. See you next time. We're going to reduce him to a puddle of bubbling
Ooh.
goo. It's
Yeah.
going to be amazing.
Thanks, buddy. Goo. I want to see what the power did. I want to see it all, baby.
I'm gonna give it all to you.
All right.
And I'm not saying baby.
I'm going to give it all to you, baby.
Nah, man.